require everyone to bring all of their documents, anything in their file discussing the Dalcon Shield, and bring them to the attorney, who then instructed his assistant to put them in a furnace and burn them. Fortunately, the in-house attorney kept a stack of some of the most revealing documents in his safe and brought them home. And after many lawsuits around the country, the in-house lawyer was brought into court, where he admitted to a group of lawyers up in Minnesota that they had covered up the knowledge they had about the Dalcon Shield.
So the Dalcon Shield was injuring people, and they literally burned the documentation so they wouldn't get caught? Is that literally?
That is what happened. They literally destroyed evidence, um, realizing that people were starting to bring lawsuits, and as soon as that happened, they got rid of all of the documents that revealed that they knew that there were infections, and that the device was defective because of its multi-filament tail string.
So did they do that out of fear of reputation or financial loss? Was there any discussion of why they did it? Or is it they just didn't want to get caught?
Well, I think it's fairly consistent with human nature that wrongdoers do not want to get caught. If you've harmed someone, that ordinarily puts many people into denial. Um, while that's not the right thing to do, the right thing to do, I think that our society decides that if you made a mistake and you screwed up and you didn't intentionally cause harm, that you acknowledge that you caused the harm, and you compensate the entity or the person, the human that's been harmed, for reasonable compensation depending on the seriousness of the injury. And our judicial system allows a way to get to a conclusion, and the vast majority of civil litigation is settled without going to trial. Once you have all of the facts and you know what the law is, and you know that the burden is more likely than not, then wrongdoers who are shown to have been negligent will settle. But our country has developed an insurance system so that it's mandatory to have insurance if you're driving a vehicle. And indeed, the pharmaceutical industry had insurance to protect their financial interests if a product or a misinformation that they disseminated has caused harm to a human being or property damage to someone. There's an insurance system to pay for it.
Yeah, so I heard from another attorney. He was like involved in one of the first homicide cases from a benzodiazepine. I won't mention the guy's name just for privacy reasons, but he was saying that it's really difficult to sue because of all of these laws that have been set in place. So even if you have a case, people are struggling to file lawsuits, which is really unfortunate. But you've successfully found ways to file lawsuits and have, from what I've heard from you, and have looked up multi-million-dollar settlements that you've really been able to figure out. So even though they're trying to cover up these things, and laws have been set in place against civilians in the U.S., there's still opportunity to file lawsuits and hold people accountable, whether it was negligence by accident, ignorance, or on purpose in some cases, maybe, or maybe they burned records. But there's still a way to sue these people, is what I guess I'm getting at. And so you've successfully done that, and with Reglan in particular, it sounds like you actually helped. Correct me if I'm wrong. You helped get a black box label warning on Reglan. Is that correct? So you've worked on not only the Del Conte, I believe, but you've also helped with Reglan getting restrictions as well. Is that right?
That is right. And I think the best way of explaining it is to go back to how it came to be that the legal system made it difficult or impossible for people, nearly impossible, obviously not impossible, because I had many clients who were able to get civil cases resolved with manufacturers of Reglan or metoclopramide. The obstacles go back really as a very political event in 1994. So first, of course, to put it into context, if you're dealing with lawsuits against pharmaceutical manufacturers, you're dealing with companies that are bringing in millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. If a drug actually has benefits approved by the FDA, authorized for distribution in the United States, usually that initial authorization is the result of fairly limited testing. You really only need a couple of hundred people in a pre-market test to show that there's a benefit with a risk that's tolerable in light of the benefit.
That's really
Um,
shocking that it's only like 100 people or so, because thousands, if not millions, of people are taking these drugs.
right, yeah, to get the initial FDA approval, a couple of hundred people was adequate for the A.H. Robbins Company to get FDA approval for the Reglan molecule that they purchased the right to distribute from a French company that manufactured the original metoclopramide molecule and distributed that drug in other countries around the world.
And if I remember,
But
I apologize, I wanted to
yes,
ask this
go
question.
ahead.
If I remember correctly, during one of your talks, you said there was a company that actually turned down to sell Reglan because they thought it was too dangerous. Is that true?
That's true. When the French company that originally brought metoclopramide to market, um, Delagrange, um, give me that question one more time.
Yeah. Wasn't there a company that actually turned down to help
Oh
manufacture the
yes, okay.
medication?
When Delagrange knew that it had a product that they were now selling in various countries around the world, they sold it in Ireland, they sold it in Australia, they sold it in France, their own country. They sold it in Israel, they sold it in South America. Um, they had a product that seemed to be reasonably effective for acid reflux, and didn't have any obvious serious side effects. And so, but they, of course, they knew that if they could get it to the U.S., well, now there's a big market. Now they could really make a lot of money. And so they looked for a U.S. company um, that would be willing to pay for the right to distribute metoclopramide in the United States. And the first company they went to, a very big company that many know of, the Merck Sharp and Dohme. Merck Sharp and Dohme had a, um, a scientist who studied what was known about metoclopramide, known in other countries around the world where it had now been used for a couple of years, and that scientist reported to the company that it was too dangerous, that the side effects were too serious, and it would not be a worthwhile investment for Merck Sharp and Dohme, particularly if the FDA was going to limit use to relatively short periods of time. If you invest a lot of money, but your patient, you can't sell it for more than a short period of time, then you really can't make money. And it was anticipated that the FDA would put a short-term use on it because by that point, two other countries, Australia and Ireland, in their FDA type of organization, they had reports coming in from physicians who were using metoclopramide, where patients were developing abnormal involuntary movements known as tardive dyskinesia.
In which we'll get into here in a moment.
So the Irish FDA, so to speak, and the Australian FDA sent notice to all physicians about the concern with long-term use of metoclopramide. So when the Robbins company when Merck turned it down, another company then turned down the opportunity to sell in the U.S., but the A.H. Robbins company, which at the time was making a lot of money from the Dalkon Shield. It was before the evidence came out about the Dalkon Shield harming hundreds of thousands of women around the world, and they were selling the Dalkon Shield to hundreds of thousands of women around the world. And so they were making money and they were feeling quite proud of themselves. And now they had the opportunity to go into business with a new drug, an oral drug, for a very common condition. Acid reflux is a very, very common condition, particularly as people get older in life, and depending on what their dietary habits are and those kind of things. Ultimately, it's believed that maybe 1 million people or more ended up with metoclopramide, or Robbins put a brand name on it. They decided to call it Reglan, and that was the first to get FDA approval. And so they had an exclusive period of time when they were the only people permitted to manufacture and distribute Reglan within the United States.
So A.H. Robbins, they not only worked on Dalkon Shield, which injured people, they also then got into using or selling Reglan, which also started injuring people as well. Is that correct?
Right. That is correct. And but what were the obstacles? Um, in 1994, George Bush Jr. Was elected governor of the state of Texas, and his father, of course, preceded him and ran for president. But when Junior got elected, we came to learn eventually that the Heritage Foundation, a group of the most conservative lawyers, were working on a plan to come up with legislation that would protect the pharmaceutical industry. Um, and the documents ultimately show that they had been working on this plan for a good period of time, months or years. When Bush got elected, on the day following his inaugural address, he called a special session of the Texas legislature, and he spoke to all of the legislators and said that we have a very urgent matter that we need to address immediately. We need to pass a law um, that would limit what he called the epidemic of lawsuits against frivolous lawsuits against the pharmaceutical community. Uh, Lawsuits against the pharmaceutical community, when they are successful, usually involve very serious damages. So if you've caused very serious, life-changing damages, and a jury is convinced that you knew about the problem and you failed to use reasonable care to prevent it from happening, or failed to adequately warn what the risks would be, when the damages are severe, juries find that it takes a lot of money to adequately compensate someone who's been seriously injured.
Which is where
So Bush said to his mostly Republican Texas legislature, we need a bill to prevent that. And he had it all prepared. He said he basically passed it out to them. Here's the bill that I'm proposing that would put an end to these many, many frivolous lawsuits if you pass this bill. And not surprisingly, his Republican legislature passed the bill. Um, and under that bill, if a drug was approved by the Food and Drug Administration, it's presumed to be to have an adequate warning and be reasonably safe. So the fact of FDA approval under this new law created a presumption that the drug is safe and effective. And they passed it that very day. Well, on the next day, the very Republican legislature in Michigan, led by a Republican governor, the governor presented the same bill. It had the same provisions. It was obviously part of some preconceived plan, which I think the evidence shows was put together by the Heritage Foundation. And those are the people, it's Heritage Foundation trained lawyers who are the now majority of the U.S. Supreme Court, um, that right now is considering whether former President Trump should be immune from accountability, regardless of what he does. Um,
We'll go into that some other
and,
time.
and that kind of thinking comes from the Heritage Foundation, a very conservative approach to our legal system.
Yeah, for the time being, since you and I have been talking for like 3 hours, we'll go into more depth on those things later. So I think we've got a relatively decent background for now to start. And so I guess from here, maybe we can just briefly talk about, maybe take a break for a couple minutes, and then we'll talk about tardive dyskinesia, not even a couple minutes, just a minute or two, so our brains can reboot.
Okay.
We'll talk about tardive and then what akathisia is as well. And then we'll go into um, how people should be filing lawsuits. And then, see, I'm getting tired as well. Yeah, how people should get into lawsuits. And then you can mention just briefly maybe like two cases you worked on, a tardive and then the akathisia suicide case. And then we'll start over from there another day. I think that'll be a good start for us and get this out to the public.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so I'm
All
gonna
right. Are we off now or is it on?
I'm gonna turn it off right now for a minute and take a break real quick, and then I've got my YouTube streaming for my subscribers to take a look from the behind the scenes.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna. All right, so we got that pause and have that recording saving right now because it's like almost 10 o'clock. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, on my end. So I'm getting a little bit tired over here. So I'm gonna get up for a minute and stretch or whatever, and then we'll briefly go into it once this saves. While that's saving, I'm going to take my break actually, and then we'll proceed.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody in my YouTube, uh, Alpha Siger, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. He's like, please let me know how to file a suit. Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about it in a minute here.
Oh, you mean someone's asking how to do this?
Yeah. So we'll answer them in a minute. I just want to,
Okay.
yeah,
Wonderful.
let's let this recording process. So just give us a few minutes and we'll talk about it. And then
Yeah.
and then Alpha, if by any chance you've got to go, we'll hopefully have recordings up. But anyway, all right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna take a break. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and uh,
I'll tell you what, I'm going to walk away, take the earphones off. And so when you're ready, text me or call me and I'll come over.
I'm gonna be
Okay.
up. I'm only gonna be up, standing up for like 30 seconds or so. Just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just hang on 1 second. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah.
I've got a cough. I don't know why. I'm gonna turn on a vent back here. Excuse me. Okay, this one. Yeah, wow. We talked for 53 minutes on that one.
Wow.
And we just barely scratched the surface.
Well, that we're off now, right? We're not on right now.
Yeah, we're off. So.
Okay, but I want to ask you about that one. We talked for a long time. Did my responses, did they stretch out too long? Could I have been more direct and
I think we
more
lost.
concise?
I think we might have just lost or got a little bit sidetracked for a moment, but otherwise, they're all right. Like I was asking you questions too and kind of dragged them out, but otherwise, I think they're fine.
Yeah, well,
But
interaction, we need to be talking back and forth.
yeah,
And when you would ask a question, that was helpful. It would help clarify a point.
yeah. So basically, I'm just going to clarify things if I deem it necessary. Otherwise, you know what you're talking about. So let me just double check this quality real quick. Lawsuits and talk about Ralph's. They're getting the emotional support. What are they?
Dyskinesia.
Oh yeah, the recording's totally fine. Okay, cool. All right, so let's just. We don't have to do it long. Maybe like 30 minutes or so, because I'm getting sleepy and grab my medication so I don't have akathisia. My subscribers don't even know yet. I don't think that I developed akathisia. Okay, so just adjust your screen real quick and we'll keep going briefly.
Is the screen okay?
Just pull it down a little. Yeah, there you go. Should readjust itself. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Let me get comfortable again too. And then we'll answer this guy on how to file because people don't realize they can. All right. Get back to get my coughs out for whatever reason. One of those days. Okay, recording started, and then it needs like 10 seconds to process the video, and then we'll get going. Okay, surprisingly, it took quite a while just to talk about just a brief discussion of the background of the pharmaceutical industry, and we barely touched on it. We've talked about this stuff for hours, and which we'll talk about more. But from here on out, let's just go over a couple things that can actually help the viewers rather than just talking about things, because we can learn about stuff all day, but if we're not solving and getting justice, like it's not very beneficial. But we did need to look back at the past to see how the system developed into what it is today, so we know how to, navigate it better. And you have so much experience. You probably have more experience than the majority of attorneys today. So it's probably some small things that people can do to probably file that other attorneys might not know, like we kind of talked about with me privately. Anyway, so with that being said, what is tardive dyskinesia, which I could elaborate on. We both know what it is. And then I'll also mention what akathisia is. So from your experience, was tardive your specialty in the latter years, or what was your involvement in tardive dyskinesia, and what is it exactly?
Well, when I finished devoting all of my time to Dow Shield litigation, right about at that time, or before it was quite done, I had a woman come to me with tardive dyskinesia, and so I started investigating that, and that became not just my focus, but my entire practice. all of my time that wasn't tied up with wrapping up the Dalcon Shield, then turned to Reglan and tardive dyskinesia because, of course, it was the same manufacturer. It was the Robbins Company that brought us the Dalcon Shield, and then the Robbins Company of Richmond, Virginia, that brought us tardive dyskinesia litigation.
So this stuff basically just kind of fell in your lap almost. It seems like the timeline. It just seems like they just fell together, one after the other.
Once I got started on that, I was somewhat known within the Association of Trial Lawyers of America from the Dalcon Shield work, because that did end up having me joined with Ralph Nader's Public Citizen Litigation Group, and we challenged the plan of reorganization up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But then tardive dyskinesia came along, and actually, even before that, the first person who ever approached me with a tardive dyskinesia claim was a gentleman from New York who was in the film industry. His name was Bob Salant, Salant, and Bob and his brother, and I forget his brother's first name, had the largest number of movie theaters in the country. Nothing compared to current large chains, but they had quite a few movie theaters around the country, and people with movie theaters were people that producers and actors and directors wanted to meet, because when a film company has invested millions of dollars in making a film, now the goal is to get it into theaters for people to see it. And Bob and his brother were the people most well known for doing that. And he also was just a gregarious, delightful, happy type person. Indeed, he moved here to Washington State, Mercer Island, not too far from my Seattle law office, after being roasted at the annual Friars Dinner that's held every year by Catholic Charities in New York. And sometimes they're put on TV, and it's usually well-known actors, directors, producers who end up being roasted by their friends. And Bob Salant was a Catholic Charities roasted person at the Friars Club before he moved to Washington. When he came here, he was somewhat experiencing some manic depressive symptoms, and he went to a local psychiatrist, a well-trained psychiatrist who was on the clinical faculty of the University of Washington um, School of Psychiatry, and he and Bob Salant was referred there, um, and he Bob's history was taken, and the neurologist put him on Thorazine, a common antipsychotic drug, but we learned afterwards that the psychiatrist had not properly evaluated Bob with an Ames test to evaluate and to get a complete history of any other drugs that might make tardive dyskinesia more likely. And Bob was put on the Thorazine with regular monthly renewals for, as I recall, a couple of years.
So that was that the medication that led to tardive for him?
And that is the medication that led to tardive.
And so what were the symptoms?
And frankly, I can't recall specifically. I could look it up whether he was on Thorazine or Haldol. Either one, those people who are suffering tardive dyskinesia know that those were among the early first phase of antipsychotic medication, and they're among the strongest tardive dyskinesia causes.
Yeah, so I want to mention, I was having akathisia and ended up in a psychiatric hospital with akathisia. And so I'm like groaning uncontrollably, and my hands are pacing or whatever my symptoms were, or have been back then, and probably still today. And so the nurses decided to give me a Haldol injection. And the next thing I know, like, it was very quick, 30 seconds or less, I bet. It was really fast. They gave me a push IV injection, and my neck goes like this, and my jaw starts locking up. And so I'm literally like stuck like this for an hour in the psychiatric hospital in my room for what was akathisia, which they just completely made worse. And so they thought I was faking it. And I don't know where in the world they would get the idea that some guy could just fake having a face like that. It's absurd and laughable at the same time. And so eventually, after like an hour, they finally come in. They see me sitting there in the chair or whatever, wherever I was sitting, still in that position with my face all locked up and everything. They're like, oh, this guy's really messed up. And so they come in and give me some sort of antidote, probably like Benadryl or something. I don't know what it was back then that they used. And so they thought I was faking side effects from these medications that were so severe. My whole face was literally paralyzed and locked up. So Haldol is not a joke. That is a very serious medication that people get injured on, whether that's the one he was injured on or not. And I'll talk to people later about me discovering that I can't metabolize those medications. But anyway, so regardless of what the medication is, we can look it up later in your records or online, I'm assuming. What are the symptoms of tardive dyskinesia that you've witnessed or have worked on? There's a guy, his name is Joey, I think Joey Marino. Unfortunately, he passed away recently. I'll share some video footage of Joey someday of his tardive, which is really severe. Like, there's days when he's unable to leave a facility because his symptoms are so bad. But then other days when he's out in public and he's literally just stuck like this nonstop, and his tongue's moving around and everything else. And so anyway, what have been the symptoms that you've seen and have filed lawsuits for with tardive dyskinesia?
Well, there are kind of two questions.
Yeah, I kind of excellent
that you come to me with. The symptom that Bob Salant had was that he couldn't stop grinding his teeth.
Okay.
He just couldn't stop grinding his teeth, and over a period of months or multiple months or a year or two, he literally ground his teeth down to the gum.
Ooh.
Just never stopped. Um, and but in terms of the symptoms of tardive dyskinesia that I've seen among the 40 or so people whose cases have gone to court, where I've represented them, and multiple dozens or hundreds others who never got to court, but because of timing and the legal situation and the financial situation. But the common symptoms that all of your tardive dyskinesia sufferers will know about is the tongue darting and the facial grimacing, the eyelid closing, the Meige syndrome that sufferers will know about. There are a number of different symptoms that clients of mine have experienced, and those 40 or so whose cases were settled, those were people that had lawsuits going, and I needed to meet with them regularly to help them prepare to answer written questions that came from the drug companies or the prescribing doctors. Ordinarily in civil litigation, those are called interrogatories, written questions that you answer under oath. But in the Reglan litigation, where there ultimately were some 25,000 people, lawyers for the brand name companies and multiple generic companies, and insurance company lawyers, I missed on a point where I was going with that.
That's all right.
Just a second. Let me pull that back.
Yeah, no hurry. We're patient.
I've had the opportunity. Those people whose cases were coming up, it required spending a lot of time with them, in my home, in their home, phone conversations, and I used to have quarterly meetings with some 120 clients, where we would meet for an hour at once every 2 or 3 months, so that I could give them an update on the litigation against the Robbins Company for the tardive dyskinesia injuries. And the law firms that got involved had different perspectives on whether to negotiate a settlement or insist on going to trial. And basically, there were 20 lawyers who were appointed because the Robbins Company went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy once the documents, once it was determined that their lawyer had burned their documents and admitted to it in a court proceeding, in front of federal judge Miles Lord up in Minnesota, as I recall. And that brought a lot of new lawsuits to come. Some 20 different law firms got involved. And we broke into two camps. There were those of us, myself, along with a friend and colleague, Fred Brenseth, and Bradley Post, who was the Wichita lawyer who got that very first Regland litigation lawsuit, which came up with a punitive damage verdict, I think of about a $1.7 million verdict, and something around $1 million or so for a compensatory damage. And obviously, that's the kind of thing that would interest lawyers. So various lawyers started advertising for tardive dyskinesia clients.
So with that being said, getting into the lawsuits, we've got people that are injured and most likely are able to be compensated for their injuries but don't know it. So what do they need to know to file a lawsuit? What should they be telling attorneys?
Well, what they need to know is that that they need a lawyer who will file their case in a state court proceeding. We have a federalist system, and under our constitutional republic, it's the states that have the duty to protect safety measures for the people who live in that state. In federal law, you'd have to have diversity of citizenship in order to be in federal court. Among the things that was detrimental to the litigation is that the lawyers who aim to take control of the litigation, claiming that they had the most experience, filed their cases in federal courts, and under the development of the federal cases, they were facing litigation obstacles where they'd have to prove that the danger that the drug company had been guilty of fraud, to overcome the presumption of innocence that the George Bush laws established around the country. After he got Michigan to pass the law, over the next year or so, most every state legislature around the country would adopt these Republican-drafted laws that presumed it was an adequate warning and the drug was safe if it was approved by the FDA, unless you could prove fraud.
Okay.
What I was able to do by developing finding expert witnesses who were the leaders in the field, they were able to show that the information disseminated in the package warnings was inaccurate, false, and misleading. I battled them on every issue. In all of the key words in the package insert, or you could read it in the PDR, they would quarrel about what the meaning of that was and how to interpret it.
Oh, we didn't mean it that way. It meant this way. So, based on their interpretation. So, maybe they did mean it a certain way one day, but maybe during the lawsuits that started happening, oh, we didn't mean it like that. I wouldn't doubt that's happened, probably.
Yeah, I mean, they continue to insist that they were giving an adequate warning, that they didn't have any obligation to warn the patient. They only had an obligation, they claimed, to put an adequate warning on the label of the bottle that would go to the pharmacy. Well, what does that do for the patient unless when the pharmacy and the pharmacist gets it, and when they change the warning, the pharmacist needs to tell the patient. But the medical community in those days was saying that it's not for pharmacists to warn patients, it's for doctors to warn patients. And doctors were prescribing Reglan in what's known as an off-label prescription, because the label said it's indicated for short-term use of up to 12 weeks, but they were saying that you're not obligated, doctors, to limit it to the indicated uses. If you find safe and effective uses over longer periods of time, you're permitted to prescribe it that way, and a pharmacist can't tell you what to do. And so the litigation was claiming if they put the new warning on the bottle that goes to the pharmacy, that's all they had to do, and the pharmacist herself or himself didn't have a duty to give any further warning to the patient.
But that's not true today,
Pardon?
right? That's not true today. So, like you sign it, when you go to checkout at the pharmacy, you'll sign saying that you either asked a question to the pharmacist or didn't ask, right? So is that where the lawsuits could start coming in with the pharmacists then? So it's like, I didn't have any questions for the pharmacist, or I did, or I had a conversation with them. I'm assuming that's what that's for.
Well, nowadays, I mean, today, after I think 4 changes that I got initiated, one change at a time with different lawsuits. Now there's an adequate warning.
Okay.
On what they're handing out if the patient actually reads it or actually asks the pharmacist to come and tell them about it.
Okay, so if they ask the pharmacist, I'm assuming this is how it works now, if they ask a pharmacist a question about the medication and they tell the pharmacist, or the pharmacist tells the patient wrong, that's when the lawsuit would be involved with the pharmacy?
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about, since we've been going for a while, what about filing for a doctor? Let's say somebody gets an injury, like I got injured with akathisia, and negligence was involved, and they developed akathisia or tardive dyskinesia, and the doctor was involved. What should they be telling the attorneys, or what advice would you give so somebody doesn't get hung up on by an attorney when they're trying to sue, and the attorney says, well, we can't sue Big Pharma, but they're not trying to sue Big Pharma, they're trying to sue the doctors. So what type of evidence of negligence would be required, or what, yeah, I guess just that in general, what type of negligence?
Well, because of the work that I did for 40 some years, um, the idea of not suing big pharma because they're too big is actually no longer a problem, because over time I've developed requests for admissions um, that enable anyone who has tardive dyskinesia to sue everyone involved. The, you sue the drug company, and you say that the drug company didn't give an adequate warning to the physician, um, and the drug company claims, well, we now have an adequate warning on the bottle that went to the pharmacy. Well, what did you send to the physician? The answer is they didn't send anything to the physician. But you also would sue the doctor, and for the doctor you could say, well, look what's in the warning that's now there. Um, did you tell your patient when you decided to prescribe the drug? Did you inform the patient that you're prescribing a drug that can and will cause tardive dyskinesia if it's used too long? And it's indicated for only short-term use of 12 weeks. Now, you're permitted legally to prescribe it off-label and prescribe it longer, but under the civil justice system, where you have an obligation to use reasonable care to prevent harming the patient, you have to evaluate the patient. Is that patient suitable for receiving a drug that works in the dopamine system, like that?
Okay, so
Let me. I want to go to another point on your own history that you gave.
yeah, sure.
You um, uh, you ended up getting an injection of Haldol,
Yeah, when I was having akathisia. So they
and
used
you were
it.
having akathisia. How was the akathisia manifesting itself at
I
that
was
time?
like, it was really loud groaning and movements, from what I could remember. It was a long time ago. I'd have to really think about it. But I'm pretty sure I was doing those really loud groans that I get, vocal groaning at that time. So then they
All
put me
right.
in a room and then injected me with Haldol.
And first of all, a push injection um, is more dangerous than an intravenous drip over 15 minutes. Um, the push injection alone increases the likelihood of developing tardive dyskinesia or tardive dystonia, and it sounds like that's what you had. Immediately after the push, you had tardive dystonia, which turned your head
So that's
around.
what the clenching thing is? That's called dystonia? Is that
Yeah, that would be tardive, or that would be dystonia, not tardive, because it was immediate. It wasn't late onset.
okay?
It was dystonia uh, from the push injection, and
Okay, that makes
you know,
sense. So it's not just Reglan that can cause dystonia or tardive. I mean, excuse me. It's not just Reglan that can cause tardive dystonia from an IV push. It's pretty much other medications like Haldol too. Then.
all of the neuroleptic medications.
Okay.
In the first generation, Haldol, Thorazine, Mellaril, and others, or the second generation that were theoretically and actually a little bit less likely to cause tardive dyskinesia. Uh, but both the first and second generation antipsychotic drugs, uh, properly thought of as neuroleptic drugs, will cause tardive dyskinesia.
Okay, so let's say somebody got injected like I did. Um, I don't know what the voluntary documents are. That's for a different discussion, I guess, for psychiatric admissions. Um, so let's say somebody got injected at the ER, like that guy that had a Taco Bell incident and ended up with the suicide case. Um, so you get an injection and you develop tardive from it. So is it literally as simple as you call an attorney and say, hey, I was at the hospital this day at this time. They gave me Reglan or Haldol or whatever medication, and I developed this symptom, and nobody warned me of symptoms to begin with. I'd like to file a lawsuit. Is that like what they should be saying? Is that it? Or
Well, yes. I mean, you could just go to any attorney where you live and say that. Um, then the question is whether the attorney that you walked into has any experience in working with tardive dyskinesia litigation, and do they have a roster of experts who have spent the time, had the education and training and experience to go through the documents that the A.H. Robbins Company eventually turned over through discovery, although it took 7 years for me to get them all. And hundreds of thousands of dollars, ultimately resulting in maybe a couple of 100,000 pages from the brand name company, and then similar amounts from each of the generic companies. We had something like 1 million pages of documents, and someone's got to read them and go through them and organize them and find ways to pulling facts together. That took a lot of time, but I now have them, and I have admissions from both generic and brand companies that these are indeed true and accurate copies of the particular group of documents that are important for a jury to see and hear about. So you could go to any lawyer and ask them, but what I'm able to do is help your lawyer wherever she or he is anywhere in the country, because I can give them the admissions that are only usable in the case where they were admitted, except that I ended up in an agreement where they could be used in any case where I was associated with co-counsel. Now, since I'm no longer currently disabled from actually practicing, nonetheless, if you go to a lawyer, wherever that lawyer might be, and give that lawyer information to contact me, I can show them how they could get the documents that will make it possible to resolve a case within a matter of months, because I have their admissions under oath in many cases.
Okay, so the best route for people to take then is to ideally find an attorney that has legitimate experience with the condition that they have, in this case, predominantly tardive and akathisia. And so maybe if an attorney doesn't, like I was doing, I reached out to an attorney saying, hey, I was given medications that I shouldn't have been on for akathisia? Would you be willing to consult a attorney from a different state that has experience with akathisia cases and benzodiazepine injuries? So it sounds like the best bet is number one, find an attorney that has experience in the condition that they have. And worst case scenario number two, find an attorney that is willing to consult with somebody, even if it's out of state, that has the experience necessary to be able to prove that the person was um, adequately, not adequately educated and was harmed ultimately from the prescriber or the companies involved. So that seems like the best option. So either a tardive attorney or a malpractice attorney in your state with a tardive experienced attorney such as yourself, right?
Well, yes, the challenge is that um, lawsuits uh, have been turning down tardive dyskinesia litigation because um, the uh, the 25,000 people who, using 40 law firms who sued the brand name and the brand name manufacturers. None of those 25,000 people got any money. They were paid something like, I think, $3,000 or $3,500 in if they would sign a release that said, I sued you because I claim that your company negligently caused me to have tardive dyskinesia, but you've shown me that I don't have a valid claim, and so I'm going to dismiss the case. I'm going to agree to sign this release that lets you off the hook for any responsibility for my tardive dyskinesia, and you're paying me $3,500, and my lawyer has to agree that it's proper for me to sign that release.
Okay, and
So,
really quick, your camera might need to be adjusted. And then it appears like the glory of
oh,
God
it went
is.
off. I think the camera went off.
No, your camera's on. You just need to adjust it really quick. And it appears like the glory of God is shining on your face like Moses here from the
Oh,
sun,
there we go.
the sunset. Um, so you've suddenly turned into Moses, which is actually pretty funny. Um, I should.
Where's the burning bush?
Yeah, yeah. Where's the bush? I just showed it on YouTube. That's awesome. Um, so I don't know. It's up to you if you want to go a little bit further, or we can follow up a little bit more
I,
later.
I'm okay. I mean, it's very late for you, and I know that your tardive akathisia is an exhausting um, ordeal every day.
Yeah.
So let's call it good. And when are you next available to try again?
I'm not sure. Let's just maybe play it by ear. Maybe a week from now or something, or not even. Well, it just depends on how I'm feeling. Um,
Well, I'm hoping that we could do it sooner than
yeah,
that.
maybe if we're lucky,
But
maybe tomorrow.
yeah, um, but send me a text and propose the day. And ordinarily, I'm certainly available at around 5 or 5:30 Pacific. But there are days this week, I think like Wednesday, I'm pretty much, I could be home all day and I could do it in the morning,
Okay.
or late morning or something like that.
Yeah, with my sleep deprivation from the Ehlers-Danlos, it will be in my afternoon, but we're like a 3-hour difference, so it might be morning for you. Um,
Okay, good.
yeah, but
All right. Well, enjoyed talking with you, and have a good rest, and look forward to
Yeah, thank
chatting
you so
again.
much for helping give us a brief understanding of the industry and the basics of starting a lawsuit and being on my channel, honestly. And it's also an honor to have become your friend over the past almost a year and a half now, I think. So that's been fun. We've had some good conversations, and I've learned a lot. I've learned stuff that I don't think many people will have ever learned in their lifetime, which is because of your experience. So I'm really honored to do that. Just honestly, even outside of learning those things, just becoming your friend is an absolute honor. And so, with that being
Well,
said,
thank you.
yeah,
Good of you to say. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
yep, you as well. Talk to you later, Ralph.
Bye.
Bye. And I'm gonna check my YouTube here. Since Alpha, you've been on for a while. We're still new to the whole interview thing here. Um, Ralph might still hear me, but that's fine. And let me check your comment. We're still new to the interviewing, so we're working things out. So you said if it is outside the statute of limitations, could an attorney still help get me the help I need when doctors misdiagnosed and being stubborn? So that's something I wanted to talk to him about further. And since I got this on recording, let me add that to my questions here really quick. If it is outside the statute of limitations, could an attorney still help me get the help I need when doctors misdiagnosed and were being stubborn? Okay, so my voice to text got that. From what I was told, and I'll ask Ralph the next time we're around, in some cases there might actually be a discovery period. I'm not an attorney. I should have asked him. Yeah, before we got off, I should have saw your comment like 2 seconds earlier. There's a discovery period, so if you find out something new about your case, from what I was told from an attorney locally, then you can file, or at least that's what they told me. So if I've discovered something new about my injury, I would then be able to file against the doctors for that. Um, so let me see. I gotta save this file. My 53-minute and 3-second. We talked for like 4 hours. It was a long time. So I would go to a doctor. This is what I would try, and I'll ask Ralph next time around. Um, go to a doctor and get a adequate diagnosis if you can, and if there is a discovery period, you have to look it up, whatever state you're in. Find out if there is a discovery period, and if there is, then according to the attorneys that messaged or that talked to me, I would have been able to file. So, like, there's still a chance. I think for me it's like 6 months. So there's still a chance that I would be able to file if we discover something new. And it's like, I know that I have other symptoms and injuries from these medications. That if I could get diagnosed by somebody that knows what they're doing, I could probably sue a handful of doctors for the harm that they've caused me. So I would look into the discovery period, and I'll ask Ralph further what to do from there. So that's the best answer I can give you for now. It's just so funny, I saw that right as we were ending it. That's really frustrating. Yeah, so I'm going to get some rest here. I actually had put in a refill for my prescription that I'm physically dependent on. By help, I mean the proper treatment. Okay. Yeah, I'll respond to that in a second. So I put in a refill for my medication, and unfortunately, it didn't go through for some reason. And so tomorrow's my last dose of the medication, and I have to somehow get an emergency amount of the medication so I don't end up in the hospital. So that's very frustrating. So you mean by help, proper treatment. what condition do you have? Do you know? I'm assuming you probably figured it out on your own at this point. So, like, if you have tardive, you'd look for somebody that specializes in tardive, which would be a neurologist. And from my experience, yeah, as Scripture says, um, find a multitude of counselors. It's a proverb. So you're going to want to look for a multitude of doctors, and it's going to be really annoying and frustrating. But look for those doctors, even if it takes a dozen doctors, and ask them to help you figure out what's going on to diagnose you appropriately. And then once you get diagnosed, that might be your discovery period. If the discovery period is a legitimate legal thing. I don't know too much about it though, unfortunately. So I hate to say it, but you're going to have to probably even go into Facebook and ask people what doctors they have seen for whatever condition you think you have, and try to go see those doctors, even if that means traveling. And so I'm assuming you're one of my subscribers and probably knew about my rib surgery. Having trouble getting proper diagnosis, that's the problem. Yeah. So I had rib surgery. I felt my ribs broken. They were probably broken before the chiropractor, but they got worse afterwards. So like one day I'm like, I think my rib cage is torn. And it turned out I read more and realized that my ribs are broken off the cartilage, the costa cartilage. And so I went online and found a group for slipping rib syndrome. I had to ask a lot of people what my symptoms were, and typically you're supposed to ask your doctor, which I would urge you to try your best to do. But for me, I was on Facebook and came across what my symptoms were. This is when people would say, you're not supposed to use Dr. Google, but Google was very helpful for me. So Facebook ultimately led me to finding a surgeon in West Virginia. And so I flew out. It's the bowel prolapse. Oh, I think I know you, don't we? We've talked, haven't we? Maybe I just didn't recognize your name just for memory issues. So I flew out to the guy that's a rib surgeon, and within like 5 minutes, he's like poking on my ribs like this, literally just poking on them. And he's like, the number rib 8, this actually hurts. Ow. This rib is slipped, this rib is slipped, this rib is slipped. So, but the problem is, it took me to angel flight out of state to a doctor to get a proper diagnosis of just my ribs, let alone the akathisia and the injury that I have. And so you have the prolapse. Are you one of the visceraptosis guys that I've talked to? If it's a visceraptosis thing, you're going to really struggle. So I might actually have visceraptosis. We're not sure yet, though. And if it is visceraptosis, I have to go travel out of state again, some way, somehow, Lord willing, even with the akathisia, to go see a doctor that specializes, or I don't know if specializes, or at least has experience, has some experience with patients that have had visceraptosis and did surgeries on them. So you're going to have to search. It's really painful and annoying. So you're going to want to definitely just start searching. And I hate to say it, there's no other way. It's literally that. Ask a ton of people and ask a ton of doctors. But anyway, I'm going to get some rest here, like you said. And hopefully my medication comes in tomorrow so I don't end up in the hospital, which would be terrible. I think we've talked before. I don't know why. Maybe because there's no profile picture. I usually remember people based off their faces before their names for some reason. So yeah, we'll talk later. I'll do some more videos on that. Maybe I'll just do a live stream and you can just ask questions. That way I don't just try to randomly come up with stuff off the top of my head. Anyway, so that was about an hour and 19. Anybody that's gone all the way through this, thanks for watching. I'll upload the actual meeting on YouTube later, and you guys can leave comments asking Ralph questions that you might have, and we'll go from there. And I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer them and to consult him. And so he's 82, so get to know him. How did you even get the doctor to see you? He was taking patients. I called the office and I said, I think I've got slipping rib. Can you guys help me out? And they checked me in. So I'll add this because this might be helpful for you. One of my issues that I was talking to my subscribers about asking for donations is that I needed Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan health insurance, like one of the higher grade Blue Cross insurance policies. Am I just thinking of Ralph? Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance to be able to travel out of state to be able to see these doctors. So based on your insurance, you can see doctors without a referral from a doctor. So you could like call this rib doctor. I think he didn't need a referral. Some doctors you can just straight up call and say, hey, I think my kidney's collapsed. Can you take a look? Without ever talking to your doctor about it, and they'll be able to go in and schedule an appointment with you. But state insurance, you probably need a referral from your primary doctor to be able to go to these other physicians that you need to see to try and find what's wrong with you. So depending on your insurance, you might have to go to your family physician. But if you have better insurance, you'll be able to sometimes just go directly to the doctors. And like I said, you're going to have to fight for it. There was one guy that I talked to. He wasn't putting in enough time. I might not even be right now. I should probably try again. Oh, my advocate, I've hired her and spent hours. Excuse me. You're going to want to spend hours and hours trying to figure it out. Figure out what's going on, and talking to multiple doctors and people that have had similar symptoms, and then reaching out to these people. And if you can afford it, use a better health insurance. So that way, if you have a stubborn family doctor, you can just go on your own. But anyway, I'm going to get some rest. This is the longest I've been up talking in a really long time. So hopefully I'm doing okay tomorrow. Anyway, I swear we've talked before, and we'll definitely be around again. I don't know when. Just hit the bell button or something. I don't post very much on my channel, so you won't get spammed with a whole bunch of uploads like all these other YouTubers are doing now. Everybody's got this mentality of, we need to upload as many shorts as possible, which I'll probably do from this video, but I don't think you need to worry about getting spam from me like that. Anyway, yeah, we probably talked before. Alright, I'll see you later. Not sure when. Ideally, I do it tomorrow, but I don't know what my medication situation and health will be like tomorrow. Otherwise, probably a few days to a week, depending on how much rest I need. I've got some zinnias that I put in my garden, and I'm going to put in some more. So I might put those in. I don't know. We'll figure it out. The zinnias can wait, I guess. Alright, I'm going to get some rest here now. It's good to see some of you guys. It's been a while. Alright, have a good night, everybody. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. And as always, stay motivated, you urban survivors. This is literally what urban surviving is about. Finding answers and seeking justice when we're injured. Alright, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Is this thing off? Great joke, right? I had to make some sort of joke at the end. Alright.